If you hear a fire alarm, we are not expecting, it's not going to be a rehearsal, so please leave by the exit there. Is there another exit? No, there used to be one there. Or that exit there. And the meeting point is at the far end of the car park. This is being recorded, although not going out live. And if you have any mobile phones, please could you check that they are switched off. Thank you very much. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, we've had an apology from Councillor Alexander, and Councillor Page is his substitute for tonight. Also apologies from Councillor Bedford, Councillor Crofton, Councillor Warnell and Councillor Newman. Councillor Wood is standing in for Councillor Newman. Also an apology from Councillor Jeff Jones and Councillor Bull is standing in for him. And that's it.
Thank you very much. I have no chairman's announcements for this evening. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No. Thank you very much. Please can we agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of February? All those in favour? All those agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Right, members, we go straight on to item 5, which is on page 9 of the papers, which is application ASR-5, which is 3/13/1501/OP, and this is, the location is Hazel End Road and Farnham Road, Bishop Stortford. We have several speakers, and the first speaker is a Mr. David Glass, who has 8 minutes. If you would like to go up to the rostrum there. Thank you.
Okay. This presentation is as a member of the East Herts Ramblers and the Bishop Stortford and District Footpath Association. On a personal level, I totally oppose the development. However, I am realistic enough to know that if this application is rejected, it will be on the grounds of inadequate infrastructure or the adverse impact of traffic, rather than building on land with an existing public right-of-way. This presentation is to urge you to get the best possible deal for walkers, pedestrians and cyclists as a result of this development, by either making conditions if you have a mind to accept the application, or if you reject it, to seek improvements to the application if it were to progress further. The NPPF Para 35 states, developments should be located and designed where practical to give priority to pedestrian and cycle movements. This is reflected in East Herts District Council's SAVE policy SD1, making development more sustainable. The application includes a park in the land adjacent to Hazel End Road and Michaels Road. In the design and access statement, Riverside Park, there is a statement: access to the Riverside Park is to be provided using a control crossing with pedestrian islands over Hazel End Road. I must say I'm a bit confused, because I was looking at the plans over there and it doesn't show a control crossing, so maybe somebody could clarify that later. A control crossing is sensible as a means to ensure the safety of people seeking to cross from the new estate to Riverside Park via Hazel End Road, and to meet the reference policies. Existing public right-of-way footpath 63 is located in the proposed Riverside Park. However, there is no control crossing planned for footpath 63 where it exits the park onto Michaels Road and crosses into the Meads. A lack of crossing will have a detrimental impact on the safety of the footpath users and give priority to vehicles over pedestrians and cycle movements, counter to the above policies. The developers identify Michaels Road as a major access road. It will also be a major access road for the ASR-1 to 4 development. Post ASR-5 development, there will be a significant increase in both traffic on Michaels Road and pedestrian use of footpath 63. Footpath 63 will provide a pleasant, non-vehicular access to the town centre for either new estate residents visiting the town or the wider town visiting the park. It would be expected that this would include more families and children than at the moment use footpath 63. For safety reasons and to promote sustainable modes of transport and to meet reference policies, there should be a controlled crossing point where footpath 63 crosses Michael's Road and from the development to Riverside Park. The MPPF paragraph 75 states, local authorities should seek opportunities to provide better facilities for rights-of-way users, for example, by adding links to existing rights-of-way networks. This is reflected in East Lancs District Council Policy LRC 9 on public rights-of-way and the Bishop Stortford Neighbourhood Plan Policy GIP 5, enhancements of footpaths and right-of-ways. Footpath 63 will be retained, but there is an opportunity to improve linkages to another right-of-way without a huge financial investment. Footpath 64 exits on Hazel End Road, just to the northeast of the development. There are wide verges on either side from the proposed development to footpath 64, which could be utilised by pedestrians if the trees and shrubs were pruned regularly. Currently, the verges are largely unusable to walk on. With an improved walking surface, this would provide a safer route to footpath 64 and the public right-of-way network beyond Bishop Stortford. Residents of the new development cannot be expected to stay within Riverside Park for their leisure and recreation. They will use other green spaces and green infrastructure within Bishop Stortford, e.g. Southend Country Park, Birchanger Wood, the River Stort, Thorley Wedge, Thorley Wash Nature Reserve and more besides. Arguably, the increase in Bishop Stortford population as a result of this development and other larger developments like Bishop Stortford North will have a detrimental impact on existing green spaces with a resulting increase in footfall and cycle use. It seems reasonable to me that developers should provide funding to improve existing green space and green infrastructure outside the development area and the pedestrian and cycle links between them. Section 106 agreements are used for traffic and schooling provision outside the development area. Why not green infrastructure as well? So basically, in summary, there should be a controlled crossing point where footpath 63 crosses Michael's Road into the Meads and, I hope, from Hazel End Road into the development park. There is an opportunity to improve the existing rights-of-way network. And finally, funding should be sought to improve existing green space and green infrastructure outside the development area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glass. The next speaker is Mr. John Rhodes. He has 10 minutes. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, before you start the clock, which I believe is on the wall behind you, I have to tell you that I can't actually see it. So, I mean, I can see that it's there, but I can't see what it says.
I'd like to interject, there will be a slight noise from the clock when the time is up. But that may not help you judge the
if
time.
I'm running out of time, perhaps somebody could, if there's just a minute to go, somebody could just let me know. Thank you. I represent the Bishop Stortford Civic Federation, which I'm sure some of you will know is an umbrella organisation for all the active residents associations in the town. And I could say at the outset that we have no doubt that ASR-5 will be developed in due course as part of the overall development of Bishop Stortford North. But the important question is when. This is the Bishop Stortford North as a whole is the biggest development the town will have experienced since Thorley Park in the 1970s. It was the subject of a master plan prepared about 10 years ago, to ensure that development takes place in an orderly manner and that the essential infrastructure is brought on stream in time to support the demands generated by new housing. But you're being asked to approve this application now with a view to construction starting at the same time as work on ASRs 1 and 2, the first phase of the development. As of today, you should look at whether you would grant planning permission for this as a standalone application, because that is what the developers have asked for. And I would suggest to you that you would not do so, because, I'll give you a number of reasons. As proposed, this isn't an urban extension. There's no point at which it is contiguous with the built-up area of Bishop Stortford. In fact, it's marooned between country lanes and the A120 bypass, with very poor access arrangements. It's not within walking distance of any of the essential facilities needed to support it: schools, medical facilities, shops, employment, or the railway station. If this were a standalone development, it would take more than a diverted bus service and a green travel plan to get people out of their cars. It's a car-dependent development. Then there's the question of school. If a JMI school is provided on site and it's a standalone development, then that development alone will not be enough to fill all the places. And so it will draw in traffic from off the site to take up the surplus places. If the JMI school is not provided on the site, then everybody will have to drive to other schools in the town, as they will to any of the secondary schools in the town. And I should say that all the junior schools in the town at the moment are full, and the County Council has just put out a request to junior schools to find an extra 15 places. It cannot conceivably be regarded as a sustainable development within the meaning of the NPPF. And that isn't just our view. Herts Highways, not noted for their critical scrutiny of developments, have said in their comments on this application, without some of the employment and community facilities proposed as part of the ASR's 1 to 4 development, it is questionable whether the development is sustainable. We agree. So let's now look at this as part of the overall development of Bishop Stortford North, which in practice it will be sometime around. The developers have chosen not to join the consortium, but that's their problem, not yours. The master plan for Bishop Stortford North clearly envisaged that ASR-5 would be the last of the sites to be developed. It is the most isolated from the rest of the town, and, as Herts Highways noted, will depend on previous phases of development for much of its supporting infrastructure: local shops, medical facilities, and maybe schools. Your officer's report acknowledges as much. For example, in paragraph 7.3.17, it says, in this location, it has to be accepted that walking distances to shops and community facilities are currently greater than DOT recommendations. In fact, they're much greater than DOT recommendations. However, in due course, shops and services will be readily accessible in Bishop Stortford North. Well, due course can be many years away. And until ASRs 4 and 5 are completed, this development will still be separated from the rest of the built-up area by a building site. So in practice, it will be a standalone development for many years to come, and once residents have got used to relying on their cars, it will be very difficult to get them out again, whatever the transport arrangements are in Bishop Stortford North as a whole. The problem's made worse by the fact that there will be no public road access from ASR-5 to the rest of Bishop Stortford North, just a busway and pedestrian access. So the car traffic will have to leave the site at one point and then rejoin the rest of Bishop Stortford North further along Rice Street. And this is an arrangement which is very similar to St Michael's Mead, which, as I'm sure some of you will know, is physically adjacent to Thornley Park, but has no direct road access to it. For all its connection with the rest of Bishop Stortford, St Michael's Mead might just as well be in Milton Keynes or even Mars. Granting permission now for this development in this form will simply create another dormitory estate for car-bound commuters. The argument which your officers seem to find most compelling is that East Herts district cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land. and that this application will therefore be judged on the basis of the NPPF presumption in favour of sustainable development. But the 5-year supply of land for housing applies to the whole of the district, not just Bishop Stortford, which has been bailing out the rest of the district's failure to bring forward sites for years. There's plenty of housing land available in Bishop Stortford without granting permission for this site now. And the development is not sustainable either as a standalone scheme or one which is completed prematurely, and so there should be no problem in defending refusal of permission in terms set out by the NPPF. You are a development management committee, and I've always taken those words to mean what they say, that your job is to manage development. Allowing this to go ahead is not development management, it's anarchy. Now, I know the Bible says that the first shall be last and the last shall be first, but we're not talking here about the kingdom of heaven, it's Bishop Stortford. And here on earth, these developers should be told that last means last. That will give time to sort out the uncertainties, such as where and when new schools are going to open, and allow the town to be expanded in a sustainable manner. So I hope you refuse planning permission tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rhodes. The next speaker is Mr. Rob Francis, who has 10 minutes.
Good evening. I'm representing Chantry Community Association, and we have around 1,500 householders in the northwest part of Bishop Stortford. Our members are very concerned about this application to develop a major housing estate on prime agricultural land with limited attempts to seriously mitigate the impact of over 1,000 new residents in a town where the infrastructure is already insufficient and which is subject to another even larger development on ASRs 1 to 4. We think the application shows zero understanding of the needs of the residents of Bishop Stortford and understates the impact of the collective developments on these ASRs. Despite not joining the BSM consortium, the applicant is assuming that this other development on ASRs 1 to 4 will provide most of the community facilities that are required in total. We do note that the applicant has bowed to pressure and has now included plans for a primary school on the site. But this is only for one form entry. This is not in line with Herts County Council education policy and does not allow for future expansion, nor for incoming pupils from Elsenham or Stansted or the villages. In fact, I feel this is rather typical of the countryside approach to planning matters in general. Throughout the process, they've appeared cynical about all such issues. The consultation that was carried out at the Charis Centre was poorly advertised, poorly attended, and amateurish in its presentation. I never thought that I would be in a situation of praising the Bishop Stortford North Consortium, but at least they showed a professional approach to the consultation process. They were transparent and they listened to what the residents said. Now, there are a number of issues which concern us regarding this application, but because I've got limited time, I'm going to focus on the traffic issue as it is the most critical. The applicant states that their addition of over 1,000 new residents to this town will have no significant effect on traffic. That's in paragraph 270 in the summary of application and NTS 102 in the environmental statement. This is patently absurd. Even 10 years ago, some traffic consultants from East Herts concluded that, I quote, "The issues and constraints presented by the existing highway network in Bishop Stortford are so significant that this study must conclude that development should not go forward without current problems being resolved," close quotes. Since this was written in 2005, the volume of traffic has increased in the town considerably. It's obvious that a good proportion of these new residents on ASR-5 will be rail commuters. This will exacerbate the already very serious congestion in the town in the rush hours, especially Rye Street, the Causeway and Station Road. Car transportation of children to their schools will provide further traffic problems. I mean, we know there's a problem in Bishop Stortford. I wasn't present on Saturday, but apparently there was gridlock in the town for many hours. In particular, we think that Rye Street is already a very dangerous road for pedestrians and cyclists. The addition of a new roundabout for access from ASR-5, taken together with a new T-junction for access from ASRs 3 and 4, we believe will cause havoc on Rye Street. While we understand that S106 funds are being offered for Rye Street improvement, we consider that the situation is insoluble. In other words, an old road such as this just cannot carry the volume of traffic that will result from the development. The Smarter Choices solution, as described in paragraph 1218, etc., in the environmental statement are not realistic and will not provide true solutions to the admittedly difficult traffic problems that already exist in the town. There is a need for a crossing point on Michael's Road that has been mentioned already, and also one on Hazel End Road for access to the so-called new green space. So to summarise, we would ask the Development Management Committee to refuse this application as it does not satisfy local plan saved policies TR1, TR2, TR10, TR12, TR17 and BIS 15. Nor does it satisfy policies from the Neighbourhood Plan for Silverlees and Meads, which has been approved by the inspector and goes to referendum on Thursday, and they are HTP7, TP1, TP2, TP3, TP4 and EP1. The timing of the creation of infrastructure related to all ASR development, ASRs 1 to 5, has not yet been fully assessed. There are severe traffic problems that still await a full traffic survey, and in addition the educational issues are not yet resolved. We would therefore ask you to delay the approval of ASR-5 until the full impact of agreed development on ASRs 1 and 2 at least is properly assessed. In addition, further negotiations are required to ensure that existing residents are properly protected. And since I've got a little time, I'm just going to add something else that I noticed in the documents, that it would appear that East Herts will not be responsible for maintaining the minor roads on ASR-5, not the cul-de-sacs. And I feel if that's the case, that's a serious slippery slope that we should not enter. The county, where maybe the county, should be responsible for maintaining all the roads on any new developments in Bishop Stortford. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. And the next speaker is Mr. Tom Gardner, who has 2 minutes. Is he here? Thank you.
I hope you'll excuse my attire. I've just moved from a football coaching session. I'm reminded that it's almost a year since young Daniel Evans of Bishop Stortford Football Club, community club, stood on this platform and spoke to all the councillors in this town and asked that you cement a future for the sporting youth of this town and to ignore them. It's sad to note that a year on, this community football club has had no contact from any other councillors apart from those supporting us. We've sent this evening a clip to Daniel of a recent meeting where it was said that the community football club, and we accepted that the lack of pitch provision in this town was at the worst level ever in this council area. and that we are now still playing on facilities that are over 30 years old. It's something that we ask you to consider this application, to consider also that we are the largest sports club in this area with over 900 boys and girls and disabled playing in this club. We have no permanent facilities of a nature that would provide football facilities for the youth of this of this town, and would future-proof football facilities in this town going forward. Within the plan before you, it refers to consideration and communication with the clubs in the vicinity of ASR-5. We can confirm that we have had no communication from the applicant in this regard. Our position is unchanged. We've received no funding, no Section 106 money, no local government loans, and no substantive support from town, district or county councillors in respect of support. And given that Daniel Evans stood here over a year ago and beseeched the councillors of this area to support this club, we remain still in an unchanged position with football pitches that are not suitable for the youth of this town, and unfortunately we see no bright future for the likes of Daniel Evans and the other footballers in this club. Continually approving plans to build more and more houses without addressing the town's embarrassing lack of leisure and sporting facilities is at best short-sighted, and we ask you to refuse this plan and make sure that future plans are supported for the sporting provision for the youth of this town.
Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Now we have a speaker for this application, Mr. Andrew Tate, who has up to 30 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to address you. I shan't be taking the half an hour. This application has been made in direct response to the Council's decision in 2008 that the land should be brought forward for development. That decision was based on the Council's assessment of Bishop Stortford in general, and the application site in particular, as being the right location to accommodate part of the necessary growth for the district in a sustainable way. And that assessment by the Council was itself rooted in the 2007 local plan and earlier formal decisions of the Council. And the Council's decision to invite the land to be brought forward also accords with its own emerging district plan and with the emerging neighbourhood plan. That consistent approach by the Council means that as far as possible, the urgent imperative to meet market and affordable housing needs can be directed to the most sustainable locations in the district on a planned basis, as opposed to being promoted in other locations in the district on an ad hoc basis, unguided by the Council's own assessments of sustainability. The Council's housing land supply figures already rely on the application site coming forward to meet present needs. And in responding to ad hoc applications, the Council has been able to point to this application site as being ready for delivery. No one, I think, seriously disputes the severe shortfall in the district's housing land supply. On the Council's own reckoning, the supply is potentially as low as 3.4 years. And if the application was for whatever reason to be prevented from coming forward now, that supply figure would be further eroded, undermining the Council's strategy of reliance on the application site proposals in resisting other less suitable locations. Countryside Properties, the applicant, have responded to the Council's invitation to bring the site forward with a carefully crafted proposal that has involved to take on board the responses arising from consultation. Those steps began as long ago in 2011, including 2 rounds of public consultation in 2012 and 2013, each of which were carried out in accordance with the Council's own guidance on how to consult. The application was submitted in 2013, accompanied by its own environmental statement, following many detailed environmental surveys. Again, the scope of all of those were agreed beforehand with the Council. And the responsiveness of the applicant has continued following the submission of the application, with amendments reducing the overall housing numbers from 450 to 329 and incorporating a site for a primary school. It has been a painstaking process, with the result that there is no objection from any of the Council's internal advisors, planning policy, landscape, affordable housing, or from the County Council in its various capacities, Highways, Education, Ecology, Archaeology, or from the Highways Agency, Natural England, Sport England, the Environment Agency, or from the Wildlife Trust. The application proposals have been carefully coordinated with the adjoining proposals of the consortium. The environmental statements of that development and of this application each report the effects of the other on a cumulative, consistent basis. For example, the traffic modelling for each proposal has been on a combined as well as on a standalone basis. And the Council had those combined effects for it when it resolved to approve the consortium's proposals last year. The technical consultees have assessed the present application having regard to that interrelationship. And apart from the formal differences to the separate determination of the applications and the difference in the identity of the developers, the combined proposals will be coming forward on a coordinated basis, even though there's in fact no policy requirement for comprehensive development as such. The proposals are a hybrid in that they include a phase 1, which is detailed and which will bring forward 130 of the 329 homes. And it's in detailed form precisely so as to allow its development as early as possible. That phase includes 40% affordable housing, 52 units in that phase, and taking account of the later phases, at least 74 affordable housing units would come forward. But there's to be a review mechanism kicking in during phase 1, which will determine whether the subsequent quantum of affordable housing can be increased. And the use of this review mechanism accords with best practice and gives you, the Council, the necessary control to assess what the proposals can viably bear in respect of additional affordable housing at the appropriate time. In respect of transport, the technical appraisals agreed with the County Council confirmed that the effects will be limited, these are their words, not even beginning to approach the high threshold of severe impact in the National Planning Policy Framework and taking account of the consortium's proposals. And in fact, when looked at on its own, the present application overstates the traffic effect, since the assessment has been on the basis of 450 units, not 329, and without any allowance for the reduction in trip generation that would arise from having a primary school on its doorstep. So even then, overstated, the Highway Authority agreed that the effects would be limited. The transport mitigation package includes improvements to Rye Street that would be of lasting benefit to existing residents. The burden of paying for those improvements would fall upon this application in the first place, another example of the coordinated approach. Similarly, in respect of the bus proposals, the mitigation agreed with the County Council ensures that the diversion of Service 510 into the site provides the sustainable response in the early years of the development, but thereafter the flexibility exists to tie the provision in with what is proposed on the consortium site as those proposals mature. As with affordable housing, there will be a review mechanism to ensure that the transport mitigation remains responsive to the needs as adjudged at the time. 38% of the application site would comprise green infrastructure. And given the Council's assessed deficiencies in current provision of amenity open space in Bishop Stortford, the provision of 10 hectares of informal open space in excess of the Council's standards will be of real benefit to the town, especially the Riverside Park, which is perfectly located to link with the wider footpath network and the main recreational facilities of the town. Associated with that, there will be tangible benefits for biodiversity. The Wildlife Trust, the county ecologist, and the Council's officers recognise the scope for net biodiversity enhancement through a management plan. The educational provision will comprise a serviced primary school site within the development itself, with the flexibility for the County Council, if it so wishes, to substitute an alternative suitable site, in each case with financial contribution being required from the proposals. And a proportionate contribution also will be made to secondary school provision. and if the County Council proceeds with its proposals for a new secondary school on land to the east of the consortium site rather than at Patmore Place, it would mean that in respect of secondary school provision, the credentials of the application site would far exceed the norm. Overall, in addition to the provision of a primary school site, or financial contribution if the County Council so wishes, and affordable housing, there would be contributions amounting to £7.68 million. It's been agreed with the Council's officers and the viability consultants employed by the Council that, subject to a review process undertaken during Phase 1, that is the maximum funding available if the proposal is to come forward and provide the relevant affordable housing. But on a pro rata basis per housing unit, that is equivalent to the financial contributions provided by the consortium in respect of its application, so that so far as the consortium is concerned, so far as the application site is concerned, there's a consistency of treatment again in relation to those two. So far as the matters raised this morning, this evening, as to the Ramblers, there will be very substantial new recreational provision. So there will be a pedestrian island over Hazel End Road, which will link between the two areas, Area 1 and 2 as they're described on the map, within the application site, and in the context of traffic calming and speed restrictions. The Highway Authority has not thought it appropriate or necessary for it to be a crossing point over Michael's Road, either with the consortium proposals approved last year or with these proposals. But there is a condition number 30, which is proposed, which provides for a review mechanism which would allow that to be provided if that was adjudged to be necessary at the time. And in relation to wider off-site pedestrian improvements, there is a sum of £30,000 that's been agreed to be dedicated for that. That is thought to be appropriate for footpath 64 that was mentioned. Then that is within the council's control. So far as the football club is concerned, £436,233 is to be provided for sports provision, subject to top-up on review, and the applicant considers, and the council officers consider, that you are, the council, in the best position to allocate those funds as between different sports groups. That is a matter within the power of the council. So far as Mr. Rhodes' point is concerned, he said, referred to the first should be last and the last should be first. It just so happens this is called ASR-5, but that doesn't mean it's fifth in priority after ASR-1 to 4. It could just as easily have been called ASR-1, which indicates that that point doesn't really have force, I would suggest. And so in conclusion, the application does comprise sustainable development on a sustainable site brought forward in response to the Council's invitation. The draft conditions and terms for the Section 106 agreement would secure the agreed commitments and provide the necessary flexibility to the Council. And in answer to the question, well, why now? It is essential that this comes forward now to provide that desperately needed market and affordable housing as early as possible. If it was to be delayed, it would at a stroke reduce the council's housing land supply from as low as 3.4 years to an even lower figure, because it's already included in the council's figures as deliverable. And provision now would also mean that the viability of the retail and other components of the Eastern Neighbourhood Community facilities that are proposed on the consortium strategy would be boosted by the presence of further customers on the doorstep, and assistance with the early delivery of those facilities, because those facilities need customers, need residents to come forward. To have the additional assistance with that would enhance the sustainability of the adjacent consortium proposals, providing another powerful reason for granting permission now. Thank you for hearing me. I would ask that the application be granted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tate. We'll now have a short recess while it gives the officers and myself time to change seats, and we'll start in a few minutes. Right, I'm going to ask Kevin and/or Paul or both to give a short summary before we open this for debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think that I need to say a lot by way of introduction for members. The speakers, I think, have outlined in the information I gave to us just then really the scope of what you have in front of you tonight. We are looking at a hybrid application for the site that's identified as ASR-5, Area of Special Restraint 5, and members will be familiar that the areas of special restraint 1 to 5 have been identified in the Council's 2007 local plan and previous planning policy documents as areas identified for residential development. There has always been an issue of timing in relation to that residential development, and we've heard from one of the speakers that the Council did resolve back in 2008 when considering housing land supply issues that the sites should come forward for development. Clearly a period of time has elapsed between then and now, and planning policy situation has moved on with, first of all, of course, the National Planning Policy Framework in 2012 and the Council's early work on its own district plan that is ongoing, and as well now members will be aware of the neighbourhood plan that will become, or is very likely to become, I shouldn't be preemptive, but very likely to become part of the development plan in the near future. So it's against that policy background that the proposals have come forward, and just in terms of the detail, again, you've probably heard from the speakers there the main components of the scheme. At the moment we have, as I say, a hybrid application outlining form overall for 329 units, and you heard it been revised downwards in terms of numbers during its consideration, commencing at 450, but now at the figure of 329, with land included within the site for provision of a one-form-entry primary school. So that's again an amendment to the scheme since it was first submitted to the Council. Hybrid because part of the proposal is in full details with us now for the first 130 units on the site, and the plans you have, all members of the committee have on the table with them, but also at the back of the very back of the report, after page 137, a couple of pages on from 137, just to give members a broad idea of the phasing there. You'll see the yellow coloured area of the site as phase 1, and then you'll see 2 and 3 as well, just to give you an idea of the scope of what you're looking at tonight. I think, Chairman, at the moment that's probably all in terms of the if you like, headline summary, but just to make sure members are entirely clear of the information they have in front of them, as well as the main report that was produced a week or so ago. Members should have a supplementary report with further information that was produced during last week, and in addition this evening there are 2 further bits of information that you will have in front of you now. One is a further revised version of Essential Reference Paper A, which is the summary of the proposed legal agreement provisions. So that's a 3 or 4 page document that you have with you this evening. And the other is the single page additional representations note, and on there is just some further commentary in relation to health service provision. And also, just importantly, on the reverse of that page, just so members don't lose sight of it, there's just a correction note in relation to the some of the funding arrangements. So that's it's not new information that's come around about as a result of further submissions. It's just a correction to the information in the report, and that's reflected in the revised essential reference paper A. Chairman, I think that's probably all I need to say in broad summary tonight, and how members may want to deal with the issues. The report's been set out on the basis of issues we felt that align themselves broadly in impact and importance, and so you'll see that we have divided up into, for example, education issues, highways issues, recreational and other infrastructure issues, green spaces and so on. It probably is helpful, Chairman, if members want to group their thoughts and questioning. Of course, it's for the committee to decide, and clearly some issues have impacts across a range of issues, but it may be helpful if members deal with the issues in that way, Chairman. But I'll leave that for you to guide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Right, members, open for debate. Councillor Ruffles.
Just a very, very broad and general one, because I'm not quite sure that Mr. Steptoe has nailed that question that came to Mr. Rhodes originally about why now, and then later we heard about the digit 5 being significant. Could we just be quite clear why this application is before us at this time, and whether the digit 5 really means, or had meant at any point, fifth in order?
Thank you. Kevin, do you want to come on that one?
Yes, Chairman, yes. Why now? It is appropriate to look back to our 2008 resolution, the Council's 2008 resolution, and that followed considerations of housing land supply that is available in the district at that time. There has been a long-standing requirement for 5 years' worth of land to be provided and available for housing development. That's not a new issue for us. However, its importance was heightened in the NPPF in 2012, where, in addition to restating that policy position, the government very clearly indicated also that if our own local policies don't provide for that 5-year land supply, then significant weight is to be given to that in dealing with development proposals that come forward. So we can probably go back then as much as 7 years ago to 2008, where we were already acknowledging that we were falling below the 5-year threshold. That was exacerbated in 2012 with the importance that national policies applied to 5 years land supply. So clearly the consortium and Countryside for both of these sites across the whole of the north area of Bishop Stortford have been aware of and sensitive to that, and sensitive to our own decision that we wanted the land to come forward. The application, of course, has been with us since the early part of 2013, the latter part for this one. There is another outline application that predated this, but the early part of 2013. So, of course, I think it's a range of factors, including our decision in 2008, the NPPF in 2012, that then supported the bringing forward of the land in that way. So there may be two important number 5s here, really, Chairman. One is 5-year land supply and our situation in relation to that, and members will be familiar with that. We have discussed it frequently. And also the ASR-5, could it have been number 1? Could it have been number 5? I think that one possibly is just one of the issues that previous, whether there was a particular policy aspiration in the past that there should be a timescale to delivery. It certainly hasn't found its way into, if that was ever anticipated, it hasn't found its way into any of our specified policies. So our policies in the local plan do differentiate between 1 to 3, 4 and 5 in terms of bringing them forward for development. But I think in relation to that, our decision that we've already made in relation to 1 to 4 show that the weight that we feel inclined to give to that now is very limited. The other issues around 5-year supply, the identification of the land for development in the longer term have been given more weight, Chairman. So, a long answer to the question. I don't think that in explicit policy terms there is any weight to be given to the fact that this is being called number 5, and there was a intended transition across the sites from 1 to 5, Chairman.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of comments first of all, for something that's been in the Council's mind since 2008 and in Countryside's mind since at least 2011, and an application in 2013, I'm very disappointed to see how late in the day a number of changes to Section 106 proposals and fairly complicated information has come forward to the Development Management Committee. It doesn't make it desperately easy for people to get their heads around it. Even people like myself living in Bishop Stortford, this is a lot of late information and a lot of options over policies. So I'm not desperately pleased with that on behalf of either the applicants or indeed our own planning department. I could here make some comments about traffic and about affordable housing, but I'll leave those perhaps till a little bit later. I think I'm going to open up by acknowledging that we haven't got a 5-year housing supply, but ensuring that whatever does come forward must be sustainable. And I think, with apologies for Kevin for cutting across areas of the report, I need to refer to 4 specific areas in which there is some significant doubt about the sustainability of this site, particularly for a hybrid application that includes the detail of 130 houses in phase 1. So the 4 issues that I've got, 2 are about education, primary school places and secondary school places. The third one is about access to community facilities and local shops. And the last one that I'll just start with is to do with sports facilities. So taking those in turn, primary schools in Bishop Stortford in the month of January were full. There were at least 2-year groups in primary schools in Bishop Stortford with absolutely no spaces whatsoever. Some of those classes in some of those schools had 31 children in, which is already pushing things somewhat. We made a decision as a Development Management Committee to proceed with ASR-1, 800 plus houses, many of which will be built before a primary school comes on board. Last month, this committee agreed another 22 houses on Danacoys Road without any further commitment to a primary school to support that. And we're now, as part of this application, proposing, or I'm being asked to give the go-ahead for 130 houses before a primary school building is operational. Now, I think it's madness. Where are these people, these families, going to send their children for primary schooling? From day one of the houses built in phase 1, in this application, there will be no facilities. So that's primary schooling, and I believe we've got a problem about sustainability there. In terms of secondary school places, perhaps not quite as tight at this moment in time as they are for primary school, but the schools in Stortford are full, and the schools in Stortford do serve not only Bishop Stortford, but surrounding areas where houses are being built as well. I was particularly concerned to hear Mr. Andrew Tate, QC, talk about if a new secondary school was approved, because frankly, I'm not sure where the 130 houses and the children, secondary age children from ASR-5 are going to go to on day one either. There is a suggestion that maybe the secondary school could come forward in September 2017, but it hasn't got permission yet. And frankly, I think we're getting to the stage where September 2017 for a new secondary school isn't particularly practical. It's probably going to be at least a year after that. So we're going to have a problem for secondary school places for people who are school age in this new development as soon as it's built. Now, Councillor Ruffles queried was there a significance to ASR-5? Well, and Mr. Steptoe did respond to that. The significance in my mind is that the coordinated plan across the whole of Bishop Stortford North was for a western neighbourhood centre serving ASRs 1 and 2, and an eastern neighbourhood centre serving 3, 4 and 5. Now the consortium is definitely working sequentially and building 1 and 2 before 3 and 4. The bad news for ASR-5 is that all their local shops are in the later part of the consortium's plan in ASRs 3 and 4. So we're going to have a situation which was referred to by at least one of our objector speakers, where ASR-5 could be built, but it doesn't have any access to any shops. The planning officer's report refers to a minimum of 1.4 kilometres as the crow flies to local shops, but then not too many of our residents are going to be flying by crow anyway. It's ludicrous to have a situation where there are no local facilities and everybody is obliged to go by car to shops either in the centre of the town or other neighbourhood centres around the edge of Stortford. I hadn't realised until one of the speakers said just how tricky it's going to be even when there is a neighbourhood centre built in ASRs 3 and 4, because as was pointed out, there isn't really a clear linkage between the road network for ASR-5 and ASRs 3 and 4. The last point I wanted to make was about sports facilities, and we've rightly, I think, been criticised for listening to complaints about the lack of sports facilities in Bishop Stortford and indeed in other parts of East Herts, and not seemingly doing anything about it. Just to pick on the community football, I think we're all aware it's the biggest community football club in the country. I think we're all aware that it's short of pitches. What ASR brings to this is nothing. It will just be even more short of pitches. There's no suggestion that the £436,000 for sports will be providing any new land for football pitches. There's quite a claim on that money from rugby club looking to enhance its facilities, cricket club similarly, hockey club similarly. But where is the land going to be for the football pitches that we need? And again, we're providing people and families with a need for football pitches, amongst other things. And the financial contribution, frankly, is not going to bring it forward. So, 4 areas from my mind: primary schooling, secondary schooling, shops and community facilities, sports facilities. None of these are sustainable from this current application. And on that basis, I will listen to what other people have to say, but I have major issues about
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Not wishing to sort of say again what Councillor Jones has said. But yes, our schools are full up, our primary schools and our secondary schools. Some of our children have to go to Forest Hall School, which is in Essex. And in the Observer 2 weeks ago, the schools in Harlow are full up. So they're having to bus children from Harlow to Forest Hall School, which means there'll be less room for our children there. And if they want to access any services like children's mental health, that is a nightmare because they're actually in school in Essex, but living in Bishop Stortford, it makes life very, very difficult for some of our more vulnerable children. And as mental health is increasing within children, this worries me severely. Windhill School, which is in the most deprived part of East Herts, has already got 2 forms of entry for reception and 2 forms of entry for nursery. Now we have a problem in the town with transport, and because all the schools in the other side of the town up in Parsonage are all full, parents are having to walk their children across to Windhill, which is about a 4 or 5 mile trek. And also from the social housing in the Aspens, which is along Michael's Road, and that is a very, very busy road. And that is part of the road it is going to be built on. And there's an industrial estate at the end there, and there's lorries charging along that road all the time. Now the mention of buses actually quite amused me, because the 510, which is supported by Stansted Airport, often doesn't turn up. In fact, I had a phone call while I was away this weekend from a lady who waited over an hour for a 510. This is a bus that's supposed to run every 20 minutes, but it's not running every 20 minutes. The other thing is that in the Observer this week, there's a comment about Bishop Stortford. Gridlocked roads in Bishop Stortford yesterday were down to the amount of traffic, police have said today. Roads in and around the town centre were backed up for much of the day. Motorists using the Jackson Square car park faced waits of up to 90 minutes to exit a car park. That is ridiculous. And somebody tweeted on the Herts and Essex Observer, hope town planners take note before they build more houses to ensure the infrastructure is in place. We do not have the infrastructure to cope with any more traffic. The other thing is that our doctors' surgeries are full. Now in Bishop Stortford, unfortunately, we have the 2 worst surgeries in the whole of England, and you already have to wait 2 to 3 weeks for an appointment. Where are all the people going to go that wants to see the doctor? Princess Alexandra Hospital, which is actually in Essex, which is our main hospital, is struggling at the moment. Where are the people going to go there? And the other thing is on ASR-5, the affordable housing is not going to be built right at the beginning. There's going to be about a third of sellable houses before they even think of the affordable housing. And talking about the local primary school, I note that, let me just find a piece of paper, that Herts County Council will not give a definitive answer when that is going to be built, and it's only 1 form of entry. I mean, Herts County Council said there wouldn't be a problem with the traffic with the Aldi site. That is blocked right up to the Hockerell interchange, and you can't get out, you can't get in, and you can't go anywhere. Rye Street, sometimes you can't get along it because there is cars parked all down one side of it, and that is going to be the main way into Bishop Stortford from the ASR-5. Farnham Road is a very small road with a ditch. You can hardly get 2 cars past there, let alone anything else. And because I'm known as the crested newt lady of Bishop Stortford, I'd also like to draw the attention to the bats, reptiles and lizards that live up there, and the chances of them actually disappearing is very high indeed. And that's what the London Essex and Herts Amphibian and Reptile Trust object to. And if you want the thing, it's 8.522. And we need to look after our wildlife, not concrete over it. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. Councillor Wood.
Thanks, Chairman. Sympathise with a lot of what has been said tonight by speakers, most of them anyway. I mean, I represent a ward just to the east of this area in All Saints Ward. I too, like Councillor Jones, I did a survey back in November of school places, primary school places, and it was frightening. I just see no way through solving this problem. Our schools are under huge pressure, and I think in November when I did it, there was only one school that had 2 places left. These are private schools, so there's a huge issue there. The second item I'm really worried about is traffic impacts. Councillors have already talked about Rye Street, Michael's Road, but there is a cumulative effect on Hockrell. I represent most roads out of Hockrell except one. But Hockrell is at the centre of the air quality management area. I mean, that area has huge problems with the air quality, and the knock-on effect of anything else in Bishop Stortford would exacerbate an already awful situation there as far as air quality is concerned. ASR-5, what worries me about it is the remotest ASR from the town centre. So people who buy houses there will be at a disadvantage. The only way around it, of course, is of getting their cars. And that leads me to, again, traffic problems. We've had so many consultants, traffic consultants, over the last few years while I've been here, who've told us always that we're wrong, they were right, and we won't have any more traffic problems, or it won't exacerbate existing problems. All these consultants have been proved wrong time and again. So as far as I'm concerned, there are huge issues. And if you were in Bishop Stortford on Saturday, the town was gridlocked. I was on duty at Rhodes for a 2:30 show on Saturday afternoon. A quarter of the audience of 300 were late due to the fact they couldn't get in or through the town. So that shows how bad the situation is as far as traffic is concerned. I really do sympathise with the community, Football Club, and their predicament. I mean, I've said it before, but East Herts has the worst provision of sports fields in the county. And within East Herts, Bishop Stortford has the worst provision of sports field. And I see nothing to address that particular issue. So I would agree with other councillors who've spoken there on that matter. And can I talk about the bus service? It's already been mentioned. The 510 is heavily subsidised by Manchester Airports Group, who now owns Stansted Airport. It's already been slightly extended 2-3 years ago because of the Forest Hall development in Stansted and Fitchett. I don't think the people who fund that service, i.e. MAG, will be too happy about that route getting even longer, especially as MAG are paying for that route. And I just wonder how many talks there have been in detail about that particular service, because it sounds all right, but is it feasible? And just to add to Councillor Simon's comments about bats and lizards and everything else that's rare in Bishop Stortford, let's not forget the rare orchids on the adjacent site. So, all in all, Chairman, there are lots of issues which I'm afraid I'm not totally happy about.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chairman. That's on? Well, I'd like to carry on with the discussion that we've been having about traffic. All too often in the past, I think comments that have been made by councillors and others interested in the town's well-being about traffic is that our conclusions have been speculative and perhaps not particularly well informed. Well, certainly on Saturday, as Councillor Simons has drawn attention to, the town centre was gridlocked. The police confirmed it was gridlocked because there was too much traffic. And I really do wonder when we are going to test the definition of severe traffic in the NPPF and start to develop our planning policies around traffic, particularly in Bishop Stortford, because it is so congested. It has some sort of medieval road layout in the centre of the town. As has already been mentioned, there's one junction where the air quality is really amongst the worst in East Herts. It's not only linked to this particular development, but we have to take into the round all the developments that are taking place, not only in Bishop Stortford, but in West and North West Essex, and where we are the focus of attention for retail, for travel, for eating out. The situation is bad. I doubt it could get much worse because it's gridlocked. And that leads me on to the NPPF, where they talk about development can only be refused on traffic grounds if the impact is severe. Well, I don't know what further evidence we need that we already have a severe impact from previous developments to the point that we've got gridlock. Where does it get worse? Now, in the NPPF, it says that we can refuse if the need to provide homes and economic development doesn't outweigh the traffic issue. But I would say on homes, who actually is going to move into these homes? On past experience, on our major estates, people have moved into this town, into this area, from outside this area. We have certainly a need for affordable housing for the residents of East Herts, but the need for market housing, I would suggest, comes from outside of East Herts. And on economic development, I would say that we're in the fortunate position here in East Herts of having one of the lowest unemployment areas in the country. We've got thriving local businesses, thriving small and medium enterprises. So therefore, the weight given to housing and to economic development, I would argue, is less for Bishop Stortford than it is for many other parts of the country. Now, I concede that these ASRs 1 to 5 will be developed over time, and in the fullness of time, with the right infrastructure, that might not be such a bad thing. But until we get infrastructure put in as a prerequisite, as a preliminary need for development, until that happens, we will be really chasing our tails. And this town will become much less pleasant to live in. The health of our people will suffer. The roads will continue to be gridlocked. and it's just not the right background, not the right scenario to have housing developments coming along, perhaps some would argue out of line timescale, particularly as ASRs 1 and 2 were going to be built with their community centres first. I just don't see the practicalities of going ahead with this development at this time before the infrastructure's in.
Thank you, Councillor Page. I'm going to ask Kevin to come in here because we've got a number of issues which have come through with several of the councillors. So, Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, because some quite fundamental points have been raised in the various members who've spoken. If I can start with one of the latter ones first, really, because it is one of the main reasons why development's coming forward, and that was one of the first questions that was put to me. The need for it. Is there a need for it? And you heard Councillor Page was raising that point just in the last, as he spoke just then. Chairman, I think members will recognise that there is a need, there is a very clear need. The Council's local plan as it stood in 2007 was based on previous structure plan work from the County Council, so going back a good period of time now, that identified 660 units a year as being the need that the district should accommodate. That was fairly rudimentary stuff compared with the sort of sophisticated analysis that we're required to undertake now. We're now in the era where the NPPF asks us to assess in a detailed way across housing market areas, across our neighbouring authorities, and taking into account much wider need to then distill what should be accommodated within our particular district. Now, a lot of members quite right in that a lot of market demand doesn't come necessarily from Bishop Stortford. Housing markets don't work in that way, they work across boundaries. But we are required ultimately to accommodate within East Herts a need that's identified, or a need that comes around as a result of the sort of economic corridors of the M11 and the route up from London through Harlow to Stansted and Cambridge, and our corridor to the west of us via the A1 corridor and Welwyn Garden City and Stevenage and so on. But there's a degree of sophisticated analysis that so far, the evidence we have for our district plan so far is that the number has now increased. So we're now looking at 750 units a year. Now that evidence hasn't been finalised yet, and it will probably change again. And I'm not necessarily saying it will go upwards, maybe refined slightly, but we're not going to be looking at something significantly different to where we've been in the past, between sort of upper 600s to 700 units a year, every year in the district. So, of course, that need doesn't necessarily manifest itself locally by people knocking on our doors to say that they need housing, but it has been identified through a whole range of work that we've undertaken and other authorities have undertaken across the region that do identify that there is a very clear need. So I would say to members, you do need to give that weight in your decision making. You can't simply avoid that issue that we need to deal with. The second, and one of the most fundamental issues that members have been getting to grips with there, of course, is infrastructure. So, okay, if we've got a need, if we do acknowledge that, how do we provide the infrastructure to support it, to support all of the needs of that expanded community? We're in a situation these days, Chairman, where almost without fail, the providers of infrastructure will not provide that in advance of development. We'd love to be in that position, of course. All communities would love to be in a position where the new school was up and built before the children started to arrive. With constraints on funding nationally and the very clear, restrictive and audited way in which all of our infrastructure providers need to work, that just is not going to happen. So what we do need to do, Chairman, and what we can do as an authority that regulates development, what we can do is we can seek to ensure that we take reasonable steps to enable infrastructure to be provided as development progresses. And we feel, your officers feel, that the proposals you have here, in combination with the wider ASRs, we're noticed pretending that they're not sitting next to, adjacent to this site, but in combination do put in place a range of measures which enable infrastructure to be brought forward. If in any way, shape or form we were able to say that we thought there was a better way that we could ensure that infrastructure to be developed, we would be offering that to you, Chairman. It simply is the case that for the County Council to invest in schools and roads, for the NHS to invest in new health facilities, for all of the individual clubs to invest in their sports facilities, they need to have a range of provision, usually funding, and obviously land. We've heard about where are these things going to be, but certainly funding is one of the primary issues that enables them to make their plans to invest in infrastructure. And we have here proposals that in this particular case provide land for a single form-entry primary school, funding to go towards the building of that provision, funding that goes towards the increase in the scope of secondary schooling that's provided elsewhere locally, to enable secondary school provision to be provided. Significant funding in the range overall of 2 to 3 million each. The exact figures are in the papers for you, so that you have in place here a framework within which that infrastructure can be provided. Timing, of course, is the crucial question. When will it happen? Again, in relation to the wider scope of development on the ASRs, members have referred to ASR-1, and decisions have been made in relation to that already, enables the first of the likely primary education to come forward. The proposals also put in place arrangements to secure the development of the secondary schooling provision. Yes, there will be some uncertainties in relation to timing overall. The County Council is certainly keen to ensure the provision is brought forward early in relation to education. It's very well aware of the constraints in the town and is working with us and with the developers to ensure it has the options in place to secure provision. So I can't say to members, yes, we can secure a position where infrastructure will be provided up front or certainly at a particular early date. But what we can say is that there are arrangements that will be secured through the proposals that enable it to come forward. And if we turn the proposals away, we certainly will not be able to say we're supporting the provision of the infrastructure. The other significant issue that was referred to there a few times, Chairman, of course, is the impact on the highways and roads and the transport provision in the town. And again, I have to say to members in relation to that, yes, I understand all of the points that are being made, the constraints of the town, the difficulties it already suffers, the ability to implement improvements in the town. Bishop Stortford in that respect is not dissimilar, of course, to many other historic towns across the south of England in that respect. We again, Chairman, here there's two main issues really to remind members about. One is that you're looking here again with the provision that comes forward through ASRs 1 to 4, but there's a holistic package of measures which includes the wider provision of the public transport services through the site in the longer term, and the smarter choices provisions as well that the two developments seek to support. So Chairman, there's an issue of probably a longer term mindset for us here. Are we saying, and officers will be saying to you, there is a need? Are we saying, well, we cannot accommodate that need because it just won't work on our existing infrastructure? Whereas I think we need to be thinking the way that our town operates in the future has to be different to be able to accommodate the need that we need to accommodate. In other words, we are seeking through this proposal and the ASRs 1 to 4 to seek to influence travel choices in and around the town in the longer term. I would say to members, yes, of course I've been advised, my attention has been drawn to the particular circumstances on Saturday, and I acknowledge that. One particular issue is not one I would say members should be giving significant weight to in making a determination of this nature. We do need to look at the full range of information that's been put forward in front of us in relation to the transport impact across the town. So yes, I acknowledge particular circumstances at particular times, but I would say to members, be cautious in relation to the weight you assign to those particular circumstances. I'm just going to add at the moment, Chairman, because earlier I referred to our policies that did make some differentiation between the ASRs, and I referred to, I grouped 1, 2 and 3 together. I've mistakenly, sorry Chairman, the BIS 3 in the local plan related to ASRs 1 and 2, BIS 8 related to ASRs 3, 4 and 5. So that was just an issue about the emphasis in relation to the ASRs I was referring to earlier. I just wanted to correct for members. So I think really our advice to members is it does come back down to the bigger picture issue that we're given in the NPPF and about the particular impact of development and the significance it has, and that we do need to seek to manage our development in relation to our infrastructure. I acknowledge that's a very important concern of members, but this, to your officers, seems likely to be the best arrangement, or certainly a very reasonable arrangement of seeking to bring forward infrastructure in coordination with development. It won't be ideal in all respects. Nobody's suggesting that there will not be some spikes in demand that possibly can't always be accommodated immediately, but it is a reasonable arrangement for bringing forward the appropriate infrastructure to support development that we do have an identified need for. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Simons.
Thank you. I realise that we don't have a 5-year plan supply, but the thought of busing 4-year-old children out of Bishop Stortford, I think, is appalling. Herts County Council now want 4-year-olds to start school, and if they don't start school when they're 4, they often don't have a place at their preferred school when they are 5. 4-year-old children being bussed out of Stortford, I think, is quite honestly worse, one of the worst things. And you made remarks about not taking much note of what happened on Saturday. Mr. Steptoe, this is not the first time this has happened when the town has been in gridlock. Often the traffic is backed up from just outside on the main road here right through to the Hockerell lights. This is a major problem. And I'm not bothered about other towns. I couldn't care less what happens in other towns, apart from perhaps Hertford, Ware and Buntingford. I'm worried about what's happening in Stortford. I've lived here for 40 years now, and I love this town. And I'm very proud that I'm an adopted daughter of Bishop Stortford. But we cannot support this application. We cannot have any more traffic, and I do object to people actually talking amongst themselves while I'm trying to address. I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, but while I'm addressing some of the things that Mr. Steptoe has said, he's busy talking to Mr. Tapper.
Apologies, Chairman, just seeking whether to get further clarification to respond to the points. Do apologise.
Apology accepted. It's most off-putting when people seem not to be listening. I think I've said all I want to say, but this town has been gridlocked more times than I care to remember now. You can't get around it. It's impossible. And if I have my grandson to stay, he lives in Dunmow, but he comes to me for weekends. It takes me longer to get out of Stortford than it does to drive to Dunmow and take him to Helena Romana School. It's taken me upwards of nearly 3/4 of an hour from the Havers estate to get up to the roundabout at the A120.
Thank you. Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chairman. Just as a small point of information that I'm after, if I could address this to Mr. Steptoe. Could you tell me, in planning terms, what is the next stage up to gridlock, and how does that sit within the NWPF definition of severe?
I'm not sure that sort of information is given to us in the NPPF, Chairman. I acknowledge entirely the particular circumstances in the town, and I do acknowledge as well, I'm sure it's not been the only time. Ultimately, Chairman, the NPPF refers only to severe. As members are aware, it talks in the particular words are around whether, after all mitigating impacts and measures that are put in place, is the remaining impact severe. Now, that's what we have to deal with, and as I say, the advisors to us from the Highway Authority are comfortable that we have not reached that threshold. There are existing circumstances in the town, of course, but this does not reach that threshold. That's the position we're being advised, Chairman. So I'm not sure if there's degrees of impact that we feel are close to but not quite there. But really, ultimately, that's the test that we have to and we're grappling with here. And does it reach that or not?
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is clearly an emotive subject about transport and, gridlocked roads. I live in Hertford, and we can be gridlocked morning and evening every single day. And if I go into Sawbridgeworth, the traffic can actually start at Harlow Mill to get into Sawbridgeworth. It's just the same. I've lived in Cambridge, and it can take me maybe 45 minutes to get through. So I'm sort of used to gridlocked towns, and generally that might suggest they're good places to visit. And I think whilst people are wanting to always use their cars, we're going to have this problem in any town. But conversely, we need homes as well. So I don't actually feel the same way about weather. I was not in Stortford on Saturday, so I don't know what it was like, but I am used to gridlocked towns. I just wanted to make a comment about health, because we so often hear about health in any planning application that comes forward in recent times, because of doctor's surgeries. I think all I really want to say about that is that I do think as people, as residents, as citizens, that we need to start to take more responsibility for our own health, because having spoken to my own doctor, not about myself, but as a counsellor, talking to her about, you know, the patients and how it works. So many people go to the doctors now when really they could go to the chemist and see the pharmacy and get whatever it is that they need. They don't always actually really need a doctor. So the surgery can be quite full of people that really don't really need to be there. And maybe as counsellors and out and about, you know, maybe we can sort of, I don't know, talk to the people that we represent more clearly about that, taking responsibility for ourselves. I take on board completely about education, because if we don't have our young people educated, then we clearly don't have a future. I take on board what the Secretary is saying about that. But as regards the roads, emotive subject, all our towns can get gridlocked, and for me personally, that isn't an issue.
Thank you. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not on. It is now. Yes, Chairman, I was very interested to listen to the Chairman of the Community Sports, because I started my career off as a councillor many years ago, and I know how hard it was at that particular time to get anything going in the town. Hopefully in Mudleyford, we're not doing so bad, but we still need more football pitches, and I can assure that Chairman that committee meetings that we have at Moorfields, we still bang the drum for the whole of East Arts for football pitches. Now, I heard Mr. Steptoe talk about you know, the money that's being thrown at sporting activities and parks and open spaces, but it's land that they want for these football pitches, and we've got an ideal situation here with this development, surely, to find a corner to put a couple of football pitches in. But we all know why they're not going to appear, because obviously they could put a few more houses there, make more profit. But you know, we're here as councillors to bang the drum for the residents, and I do feel sorry for these people that do run these sports associations, because Mr. Steptoe talked about planning. Well, you can plan as much as you like, but if you haven't got the land to put a pitch on, it's dead in the water. The other thing I'd like to pick up on is I've been on this development management for many, many years, and when I look at 22% affordable housing, that must be the lowest that we've ever passed or gonna pass. I don't like the year 22%. Now, the developers are saying that they can't make enough money. I really do feel sorry for them, but 22% in my mind is very, very low. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'd like to raise this question of the sequence. As I understand it, the point's been made by Mr. Steptoe that very often the building of the housing has to come before the supporting infrastructure. But if we're able to take a sort of vision of the whole of Bishop Stortford North site as a whole, is much of the housing in ASR-5 dependent on what's going to be provided through the other parts of the development, ASRs 1 to 4. And therefore, is it premature for this development to be coming in front of us at this stage when a lot of the infrastructure that will be provided in due course is yet to come?
Thank you.
Happy to come in, Chair. Can we just talk about schools, first of all, which are referred to in the report? In particular, I refer to section 8.3 and 8.39, which deals with the primary provision. Now, Councillor Jones was correct in his introductory comments in saying that this is quite a complicated picture. It's a moving feast that we've had to deal with in terms of settling the education provision for the whole of ASRs 1 to 5. The position is that the consortium have a planning permission for one FE in ASRs 1 to 2. They have a permission for 2 or 3 in ASRs 3 to 4, and we're looking here as an application for one FE in countryside site ASR 5. Altogether, that would accommodate pupil yield. The problem is that that is not the Education Authority's preferred distribution of forms of entry. They do not like single entry schools because they, in their view, don't give enough scope in terms of the education offer. They can do better. They can offer more in 2FE. And of course, there are also financial savings in terms of build costs if one can have 2 or 3 FE in one school. So what they're currently doing is negotiating with the consortium to turn that first school on ASRs 1 to 2 into 2FE. That will then provide A, better schooling, but B, be able to cope with the early years of the Bishop Stortford North development, including children from ASR 5 as required. Now let's remember that not all the development happens at once. The house builders, I believe, are usually hopeful of selling one house a week. So it takes quite a long time to work their way across the developments, and therefore the child yield, the pupil yield, is coming in a steady flow. They would hope to have the secondary school open in September 2017, which would then be able to cope with all of the further pupil yield that comes from ASRs 1 to 5, plus they'll provide an extra FE to take care of additional need within the wider town. So it's a 6 FE secondary school altogether. They are hopeful that that first primary school would be open for September 2016. Now I'm going to a meeting tomorrow to talk about the design of that school, some of the other issues that will come up in terms of getting a planning permission. But they want that school to be there early so that it can take that initial pupil yield. The second primary school, if it's a 3 FE, if in other words they can convert the 2 FE in ASRs 1 to 3, 4, plus the countryside single FE, if they can turn those into one 3 FE school, that would then be available from September 2018, I think, I might say, onwards. So there'd be a steady provision of forms of entry to meet a steady growth in pupil numbers across the site. Now that's what, obviously, the County Council are planning. They haven't actually completed those negotiations yet, but everyone is, I think, reasonably positive that that's the sort of outcome that will be achieved. If it's not achieved, then of course we have the fallback positions, 1 FE and ASRs 1 to 2, 2 to 3 and 3 to 4, and if this application is approved, there's another single FE there. But that's very much a fallback. County Council are working very hard at the moment to create that better distribution of schools. In terms of other forms of services, social infrastructure, there's something in the report about the health centre. The NHS are negotiating now with the consortium to have a site for a health centre, preferably in ASRs 1 to 2, possibly in 3 to 4, but we would all hope that it's in ASRs 1 to 2. And you can see that there's a recommendation here that a contribution is made, financial contribution is made towards the build and fit out of those premises. In terms of the Eastern Neighbourhood Local Centre, the consortium are expecting to start work on that in 2018-19. So by that time, ASR 5 will certainly not be complete. It may be getting towards halfway through. at 50 houses a year. There'll be a steady again increase in population, which, as someone mentioned earlier, which possibly getting, but it will provide another reason to build that neighbourhood centre. Bearing in mind that those neighbourhood centres, the shops, the employment that's also in 3 to 4, they will be provided by other developers, commercial developers, who need to be attracted to it. They need to see that there's a population locally that is bound to use the facilities that they provide. So, all in all, taking into account the steady growth in population and this steady provision of facilities and social infrastructure, there's optimism that the two will come together.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Chairman. I wish I could share Mr. Tapper's optimism. I don't think we should be giving planning permission on the basis of optimism. We should be giving planning permission on the basis of a balanced development where the housing meets the infrastructure meets the housing. I accept that in 44 years' time, at one house a week, when we finished 2,200 houses, that all the infrastructure will be in place and all the housing. But what I am very, very uncomfortable with are what Mr. Steptoe describes as the spikes in demand that can't be provided for. The bad news is those spikes in demand are going to be children who haven't got a primary school place in Bishop Stortford or a secondary school place in Bishop Stortford. Maybe the negotiations with Hertfordshire County Council will come good, and some primary schools will be provided in the right configurations in a reasonable time period. But like everybody else, Hertfordshire County Council has since 2008 to get this right. And here we are in 2015, and all we've got is optimism. Well, I think we have to be more realistic than that. And I've said this in relation to developments in other towns in East Herts. What we can't have is the certainty of housing and the uncertainty over the infrastructure provision. And what I've heard tonight are some reassurances about some aspects of the infrastructure, but I haven't heard anybody give a guarantee there'll be enough primary schools, places for Stortford children from these new developments in the time for when before the schools come along. If the sequence of development was west to east, if the sequence of development was a consortium covering all 5, then I think we could have been assured that there'd be a degree more coordination. But what we're doing by having 2 different developers in the ASRs is that we're giving the front-end leeway to both of them separately to build a few houses before they provide the infrastructure. And the result is a lot of houses before the infrastructure is there. And on schooling in particular, I think this is a disaster waiting to happen. If this was an outline planning application on its own, I would have a different perspective on this. But what we're giving the go-ahead for tonight isn't just an outline planning permission for ASR-5. It's for 130 houses without basically any infrastructure. The bus service isn't going to be diverted until 150 houses are built. So for the whole of this first phase, we're reliant on people with cars. There's no indication that the primary school is going to come along in that time. It's very clear that the developer wants to get on site, and for good market reasons, I'm sure there's a market out there for that, for people to purchase the houses. But the big problem is going to be infrastructure to go with it. And I've heard what's been said tonight in response to a number of the questions raised, and I think I'm getting to the stage where I have to say this is not sustainable development from a social point of view. It doesn't meet the needs of the NPPF in terms of matching infrastructure and housing. And as much as we need the housing, there's no point in putting the housing there. We haven't got the infrastructure. And certainly from a point of view of schools, and it may well be other aspects of infrastructure as well, I would be happy to put a proposal together to refuse this on the basis that the infrastructure isn't there in time. I'm not saying that it won't be there eventually. These spikes, the need for the facilities will be when the houses are there, not several years afterwards, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Is that a firm proposal, or is that something you wish to look at shortly?
I'm keen to hear what other people have to say, but I haven't heard a response, certainly on the school side, that reassures me that we're not going to get into a mess.
Councillor Page.
Thank you. Well, I think Councillor Jones speaks a lot of sense, and I would certainly support that proposal, but I'd also like to go ahead and say something else. So far as I'm concerned, I've been about trying to protect Bishop Stortford from this particular development, the adverse impacts of this development about infrastructure. I'm now thinking that I ought to be trying to protect and defend ASR 1 and 2, because with this flexibility and movement in primary schools from one place to another, it does suggest to me that it's going to be quite top-heavy in ASR 1 and 2. The traffic implications will have to be reassessed, that there will be extra movements of people into Haddon Road to the roundabout which accesses 1 and 2, which already is a cause of great concern to local residents. And I really do think that trying to play fast and loose with infrastructure for ASR 5, pushing it elsewhere, really is going to cause us all sorts of problems. And this isn't a sure plan for the future. It is really finger in the air and hoping for the best.
Thank you, Councillor Page. I think Councillor Jones has not made a formal proposal to refuse this yet. He said that's something he'll be looking at. Councillor Moore.
Before there's any proposal comes forward, can I just, on page 4 of the extra that we had, 2.5, can I just confirm that it says from Kevin, after allowing for affordable housing at 22.5 across the site, that is what's on offer, is it, from the development for affordable housing? Where
Yes,
we have
that's...
a policy, because the council's policy target of 40%, up to 40%, and yet there's only on offer 22.5%. Can you just confirm that? That's what's on offer.
Yes, I can confirm that. It's 22.5%, excuse me, across the whole site. Phase 1 would be 40%, and the rest of it distributed over phases 2 and 3. The policy is up to 40%, and that's subject to viability assessment, which of course has been part of this process.
Okay. I don't actually personally think that's acceptable, 22.5%. Social housing.
Thank you. Any other comments, members? Kevin, right from
Chair, I was going to, just on that point particularly, the provision of affordable housing, it is available to members to give consideration to the way that infrastructure provision and funding is secured through these proposals. So effectively in your latest version of the proposed Section 106 agreement, you'll see in there, of course, there is a whole range of funding that's summarised at the end of that as 7.68 million and the 22.5. Now, it is available to members to discuss and give consideration to whether that balance is right. We've heard a view there in relation to the provision of affordable housing, and members may feel that's unacceptably low at the benefit given to provision of other forms of infrastructure. Of course, there's been a lot of dialogue in relation to education provision as well. So, as it stands, as a result of fairly lengthy discussions that officers have had with both the infrastructure providers, so obviously the County Council in relation to education, our own officers in relation to housing, affordable housing provision, and the developer, of course, in relation to their ability to release value from the development. That's a balance that we felt was a reasonable and appropriate one, but it is available to members if they feel that that balance is not right, to give consideration to that.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Page.
Another question really for Mr. Steptoe. On this viability, is 22.5% the most that will enable the development to be viable? We don't seem to have sufficient information given to us over viability. Or what is the highest density, highest proportion of social housing that could be viable on this development, and how has that worked out?
Thank you. Stephen.
The viability assessment that's been carried out on this development, if you look at paragraph 2.4 of that supplementary report, in fact, it shows a deficit on the scheme. However, the applicants have taken the commercial decision, if you like, to proceed and to take something of the commercial risk on the sales values that they will ultimately get from the site that will enable them to cover off this amount of affordable housing and all of the other Section 106 contributions that are being proposed. So it's a very tight situation. It's not a situation where this development generates so much money that they're able to cover all of our requirements, either in policy terms with affordable housing or in terms of social infrastructure. Contributions are contributions. They're never expected to pay for everything. The government, nowhere does the government say a developer must pay for the entire cost of social infrastructure or highways mitigation or whatever. Everything is now subject to a viability assessment. And I've tried to show in the paper that this is a very rigorous process. We've employed a number of people to look very thoroughly at the modelling which Countryside have carried out. Now, it's commercially confidential for obvious reasons, but I have every confidence that the advice we're receiving is good advice, and that the overall package is one that, whilst, as I say, is very tight in terms of viability assessment, the applicants are willing to and able to support by taking a little bit of a commercial risk on it.
Councillor Page, could you put your microphone on, please?
Just confirmation then, is it unrealistic for us to expect in developments of this nature more than 22.5% social housing?
What Kevin was saying was that, in a sense, it's your choice as to whether the pool of money available is spent on affordable housing, or libraries, or youth. Education would be a difficult one to change, but there are areas where you might think that you have some choice as to how you spend the money. We've put a recommendation forward, but it is only a recommendation, and we'd be quite prepared for you to change that. Having said that, money going into affordable housing is an expensive provision. We'd have to look at and see what a 1%, 2% change cost in terms of the money you then have to take away from the other forms of social infrastructure that are being asked for by these various other service providers. Now, as with ASRs 1 to 4, the applicants have agreed that partway through the development they would put themselves through a reassessment in terms of viability. In circumstances where sales prices of houses are rising faster than costs, which at the moment is the case locally, it may be that a more favourable position can be reached so that additional money can be put into topping up in terms of affordable housing and those other areas that haven't had their full funding at this stage. I can't promise that because I don't know what the market will produce at that point in time. But it is an opportunity to provide additional funding, and it would be your choice as to how you use that funding at the time.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Actually, because I'm not going to maybe articulate this very well, so just bear with me, please. It just seems with this development there are so many ifs and buts. I mean, the major thing we've been talking about for people is education, obviously, definitely. Sports facilities, it's all a bit iffy. And then we come down to social housing, and there again, we're maybe being invited to look at the amount of money that's being put forward, that maybe we could change our mind about the detail. And so that's sort of a bit up in the air, really, and that sort of suggests to me that I wouldn't be comfortable to approve that tonight if in the future we would then have the opportunity to look at the detail because we've already passed it. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying? Maybe not.
Thank you. Stephen.
You have a proposal in front of you, Chair, which is very clear in terms of what it's saying in terms of the contributions that could be made today in granting planning permission, both in terms of affordable housing and the split, the type of tenure that would be offered. You have clear proposals in terms of the monetary contributions to a whole range of services. And it is a fact that actually in terms of per dwelling or per person, the amount that's being offered is pretty similar. That's not far away from ASR's 1 to 4. So in that sense, it's good because there is a lot of support being given. It may not be as much as we and the other service providers would like, but it's a very well engineered in financial terms process that's got us to this position. It's not enough, we always need more. But today, we believe that's a firm basis for recommendation. Everything I've said about liability reassessment in the future, well, I can't promise anything because we don't know what state the market will be in. But it's a strong market locally. I'd say there's a good chance that it would be a positive reassessment. But one can only hope in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Simons.
Thank you. Unfortunately, hope doesn't always bring results. I wanted to, this says there's going to be improvements to Rye Street, and I'd like to ask Mr. Steptoe for clarification on this, because the houses are right up to the road, and there's no spare land on the other side unless you start demolishing houses there. So how are they going to improve Rye Street?
I was going to say I can start to respond, but also we've got Paul Chappell here from the County Highway Authority who could probably give more detail. But the improvements are solely within the land. As far as I understand it, is controlled as part of the highway, so it doesn't require third-party private land ownerships. But Mr. Chappell might be able to give us some more detail on that.
Yes, the improvements proposed for Rye Street, there's a scheme that's been agreed in principle at this stage. Is aimed at speed reduction, a continuous pedestrian facility from the ASR-5 site into the town centre, and making it an improved corridor for bus services as well. So it's a package of measures: traffic calming, improvements to footways, improved crossing points. I think there's, between the ASR-5 site and the town centre, there are 3 controlled pedestrian crossing facilities. One of those is part of the mitigation from the ASR's 1 to 4 site, and then there's 2 further uncontrolled crossing points, upgrades to bus stops along the route. And at the moment, the traffic calming that's agreed in principle is a speed cushion nature,
Sorry. One thing is, Hearts Highways. You said, well, not you personally, but Highways said when Aldi was built, there'd be no more traffic and no more problems. It's actually got a lot worse, and I just wonder what planet highways live on, because I think it's the planet Zog. Now, you're talking about Rye Street. You cannot get a delivery van and a bus down Rye Street the way it is at the moment. Now, you're talking about traffic calming. There's a roundabout that comes out from Grange Paddocks. You've got the pedestrian crossing further up, which used to be the old post office, which is now the ironing shop. There is no other pedestrian crossing along the whole of that route. There is cars parked all along one side, which is part of the permit scheme, which was put in by East Hart. Many of those cars have their wing mirrors knocked off. So how are you going to improve Rye Street?
The intention of the scheme is not to provide additional capacity down Rye Street. It will be to make it a safer journey through the street, so it will be to slow traffic down. Parked cars will help that. That's always part of a traffic calming scheme, but we will look at where the waiting restrictions are to get a package of measures in a continuous way. And in terms of Aldi and traffic impacts, I think with all these developments, we haven't said there won't be extra traffic. It comes back to the MPPF. There will always be additional traffic that we assess on the back of a development proposal. We look at the distribution of that traffic. We try to mitigate it to a certain degree, but it's very, very rare that you could mitigate that traffic impact back down to how it was previously. It's, with new development comes new traffic.
Sorry, but quite often Highways says there is no problem with traffic flow if something is built. We see that time and time again in our papers when Hearts Highways is actually mentioned. You know, when are you actually going to acknowledge that a town that is gridlocked, and not just once or twice, but quite often, is not going to have a problem with all these houses being built?
I think, sorry, I'm taking up. I sympathise with your comments because we do have major problems with the congestion on the roads in East Hart. I can't see, unless there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds put forward from some source, that the situation is going to improve. It's taken 30, 40 years to get the possibility of a Little Haddon bypass on the books. That will be decided in the autumn, I believe. But even with that, it's not going to solve the problem of the A120. So all the roads around our towns are already very well used and suffer major congestion problems. Members, any other comments? Councillor Jones.
I think it's about time that we put a proposal together. I'm still majoring on the fact that I haven't heard anything that gives me confidence that the families in 130 houses that we're being asked to give permission for will have schools to go to in the short term. Paragraph 8 of the NPPF refers to achieve sustainable development. Economic, social and environmental gains should be sought jointly and simultaneously through the planning system. I think we've got a problem with this one in terms of at least the social sustainability, particularly from the education point of view, but I think it also applies in terms of the sports side, and probably the economic side in terms of the lack of a local neighbourhood centre, at least for a number of years after this is built. So I'm going to propose that we refuse this application on the basis that it is not socially sustainable, but I'm happy to add other comments in. I don't want to just measure on one thing if there are a range of other factors which there is consensus amongst this Development Management Committee in terms of reasons for refusal. And a little yellow note says insufficient social housing, and certainly that was one of the factors that a number of people have talked about. So I guess that's social sustainability from the education side and from the social housing side. So I'll put that forward as a proposal and see where we go.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. Do you have a seconder?
I would second that proposal. We can add caveats about social housing, particularly 22.5% is unacceptable outside development.
Thank you. And the reasons you're proposing is because it is not socially sustainable and there is insufficient social housing. Yes?
As well as the education. The insufficient timely education at both primary and secondary level.
Kevin, you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Chairman. I've captured two elements there, just for clarity. So not socially sustainable on the basis of insufficiency in relation to provision of education, education facilities, and inadequate provision of social housing or affordable housing, if I can use that terminology. In relation to education, at risk of repeating possibly where we've been already, clearly the way or what we're being asked to support at the moment, all members have already supported. They recall ASRs 1 to 4, first phase 800 units or thereabouts, and this first phase 130. So those are the numbers we're working with at the moment. And Stephen referred earlier to ambitious developers are keen to deliver one house a week, and we have 5 of them on ASRs 1 to 4 and another one here. So, 50 houses, if we can call that 50 houses a year by each of the 6 developers equals 300 in a year. These very ballpark figures, Chairman. No houses are in place yet. We haven't yet actually granted permission or issued the decision notice in relation to ASRs 1 to 4. Legal agreement negotiations are still they're concluded, and the administrative processes around completing the legal agreement are taking place. The developers there are very keen to get onto the site, and even with that keenness tell us that they're unlikely to deliver housing which people can move into until probably either very late this year or very much more likely early next year. Now, I say all that because this is the sort of judgment that we're trying to work with, or this is the sort of information we're trying to work with when we're putting infrastructure provision in place. And you've heard about the County Council desirability to bring forward at least a 1 FE, and are working with the developers to provide a 2 FE school as early as September next year. Will they match entirely? And maybe I regret the use of the word spike earlier. Will they match entirely? That is clearly our articulated aim. Is that enough for us to say that the impact of, and returning to the NPPF, the impact of the proposals is significantly and demonstrably outweighing the benefits? My feeling is, Chairman, that it isn't. There is enough of comfort in relation to the provision of education that we can support the proposals as they are. But ultimately, it is for members to make that decision. My view is that if further testing in relation to that is required, and members are clearly doubtful and concerned, that is something that we can be asked, if members want to go away and further consider, and is there a way in which further comfort or further anything of more definite circumstances can be provided for members to enable them to be more comfortable in relation to that, Chairman. So it seems to me that on the basis of the information we have, there is sufficient in terms of comfort, but members, I clearly hear the feedback, but that potentially more certainty can be achieved from members. The affordable housing provision, in relation to that issue, the 22.5% overall, we're saying to members that there is a potential for change to that, either through realigning funding streams that are available now, and or through the viability reassessment that will take place later. If members feel there is anything to be achieved by the first of those, in other words, assigning more funding towards affordable housing and less to other areas, with the caveats that Steve raised earlier about it's difficult to draw that away from education, because that's clearly a concern of members as well. But if members feel that is something that's worthy of assessment, then again, I think it's an area that we can be asked to look at for members to be able to provide alternative scenarios if members feel that they're not willing to, and I can understand entirely why we would not be willing to pitch them forward this evening. Ultimately, the fundamental question is again, it comes back to the crunch that ultimately, even if, for example, there was some reassessment and realignment of funding that enabled us to push up that percentage by a modest amount, because it would be clearly the difference we have here is significant. We're not going to achieve 40%. Members will recall that ASR-5 provide just over 30% on average overall. So you can see the sort of figures we've worked at. We're ultimately making the decision, well, is the viability situation of such it's pitched in such a way that, again, is the impact of allowing development with that provision of 22.5%, is that so significantly and demonstrably harmful, again, these are the NPPF words, that they outweigh the benefit of allowing the development to come forward in the form that it is. So overall, Chairman, my capturing that, I think my advice to members is that they're not issues of principle in relation to the development. They're issues of significant concern about the arrangements around infrastructure and how it's balanced. Those are areas that we can give further consideration to if members feel that is something they would like us to do, rather than, if you like, drawing the curtain down now through a refusal that, if you like, stops that sort of further consideration.
Councillor Ruffles.
Chairman, I don't feel I want to refuse, but I'm obviously as concerned as other members are about the impact and the order of infrastructure and the development that's going to need that infrastructure. So I would propose a deferment, and I would say that I'm looking personally around the comfort bit of education, first and foremost, and then the 22% affordable, if it's possible to increase that proportion. I'm obviously, and I'm sure other members would welcome it. But I want to be clear that my own thoughts are really around just getting a better guarantee, something like a better guarantee, that the education side would be in position when it needs to be.
Thank you, Councillor Ruffles. Is there a seconder to Councillor Ruffles' proposal for deferment? Councillor Andrews. You're seconding that, yes? Thank you. Kevin, do you want to comment on that proposal?
I'm not sure, Chairman, if there's much more I can add, Chairman. It does seem to me that those issues are worthy of further exploration. If members clearly need more comfort in relation to those matters, or the education provision is clearly a primary concern, and the provision of affordable housing, that is something we can seek to achieve for them. I cannot give any guarantees. As you've heard us say already this evening, cannot give guarantees, but it does seem to me that that is something that is worthy of further exploration. So a deferral does have merit, but as I say, I cannot give guarantees to members in relation to that.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to respond to Kevin Steptoe's view that this isn't a difference in principle. I think the major problem I've got here is the fact that this is a hybrid application. If this had come forward as an outline application for a number of houses and a primary school on the site, then it may be during the discussion on that we could have come forward with some of the issues associated with that, such that when a detailed application came forward, it would have come forward in a way that would be more acceptable. The issue in principle that I've got with this is the proposal, the detailed aspect is for 130 houses with basically no social or economic infrastructure associated with it. And on that basis, I don't think we can defer this. I think this is a refusal, and I understand the wish from a couple of my colleagues to see if we can find a way forward on this. But this is more fundamental, I believe, than just a deferral to look at specific things. If we are going to defer this, then I've got a menu of other things I'd like to have considered as well. But I think, depends which order you want to take the proposals.
It will be the proposal for refusal first. Any other comments before we take a vote? Proposal is that this application is refused, proposed by Councillor Jones, seconded by Councillor Moore, because of it's not socially sustainable, insufficient social housing, insufficient primary and secondary education provision. All those in favour of refusal for this application, please show. And those against? That is refused. There is no further urgent business, so the meeting is closed. Thank you.